Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone, I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, there's been a hell of a lot of news, and we're going to cover it. Spoiler warnings, we're going to talk about the UFC and their deal with CBS. But as part of that deal, Nick, we're going to talk about, is this the death of pay-per-view? So the question I have, can you remember the first pay-per-view fight you bought or the first pay-per-view sporting event that maybe is memorable to you? I know for me, the first pay-per-view fight I ever purchased was in 2007. And I had to go to Google to remember that. I didn't remember off the top of my head, but it was the Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather fight. So that was the first pay-per-view purchase that I ever made. It was me and a group of about $10. Everyone just throws in a tenner and you go about your business and you watch the fight. So that's the first pay-per-view fight I ever bought. Do you have any that stick out to you?
Well, the first one that sticks out to me, I just have no idea. I can't remember if I paid for it or if I actually watched it live. But the one that jumps to mind was the Tyson Holyfield pay-per-view, where all the controversy around the ear bite happened as well. But I don't actually know. I think it's just like a memory that's etched when you talk about pay-per-view, but I might not have actually even seen it live. I can't remember. The one that does stick out to me was when I was in my 20s, and I was sharing with a bunch of mates a flat, and I can't remember exactly which boxing match it is. I think it was a big fight in Australia, so not big worldwide, but there was a fighter who was actually a rugby league star. I think he played for Australia, he was like one of the best in Australia, and he just switched to boxing midway through his career at the peak, right at the peak of his career, one of the best in Australia rugby league. And then he became one of Australia's best boxers. And I think his name was Anthony Mundine. And I think it was with Paul Green was the fight. And it became quite a big story because, they built up the tension, they built up the hype. He was this kind of figure that wasn't unanimously supported. He was quite, what's the word? Not controversial, but more like abrasive, I guess is probably it. Like didn't have much of a filter. So he basically had people that loved him or hated him.
I mean, people will love him today.
Yeah. And I remember that because we set it all up. We wanted to go to the big screen, so we got a projector and projected the game onto a wall in our flat, which we ended up having like 10, 12, 14 people over to watch it. So that was quite a cool experience. But what happens after a few drinks and things get a little bit long, as these sort of fight cards tend to be, is the wall just ended up getting saturated with beer and things getting thrown at the screen because, you could throw stuff at a wall. Like, there's no damage to be had. Yeah. So afterwards was absolute utter carnage that we never bought a pay-per-view fight again after that. But that one's extra in my mind about the event-based experience of pay-per-view and the importance of being able to afford a cleaner.
Yeah, to be fair, I had a similar experience back when I was a younger lad, and me and my friends, every year we did a destination draft for fantasy football. So the winner of the previous year got to pick where we were going to go. In one year, we went to Brussels, had an incredible time. Those who have not been to Brussels, they are famous for having very strong beers. And we met some locals one night, just had a grand old time with them, a lot of fun. And it was the same weekend that there was the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather boxing match. So they went and invited us to their flat like 2 days later to go watch the fight. Based on when that was, basically that fight started at 7 a.m., pretty much local time in Brussels. So like we'd been out the night before, maybe got like 3-4 hours of sleep, went over to their house. And then, Nick, as you said, a little bit of alcohol involved. And basically it ended like with 8 a.m. One of the flatmates was from India, and we ended up doing kabaddi, like somewhat drunk, somewhat hungover from the night before, like 8:30 in the morning in the middle of the yard, like waiting for the fight to go on. So that might be my most memorable pay-per-view experience.
That wins. Kabaddi it's a fun sport to watch. I have never done it in person though, and I still don't really understand the rules either. But that is a heck of a way to start your morning. Where do you go from there? Like, is it basically it's all downhill from there, or do you just keep? It's an endurance. It goes to marathon now, and you've got to like persevere through the rest of the day, or do you crash at 9 and then give up on the rest of it?
Well, the thing was, that was like the last day of the holiday. Like we were all getting the Eurostar back. Yeah. So like, I think we were all just basically pretty hurt between playing kabaddi and just 3 days of nonstop drinking. But like I said, it was all about the pay-per-view fight. The good thing though, is when you're in Europe purchasing American sports fights, the pay-per-view is a bit cheaper because like they know you're not, primetime audience and stuff like that. But yeah, so both my most memorable pay-per-views both involved Floyd Mayweather.
And look, you can have a great time in places like Belgium. The Belgian beers are super tasty, but my gosh, they sneak up on you fast if you don't check what alcohol percentages you have in those beers. But anyway, I've had a lot of good times in Belgium over the years.
It's very good. But Nick, we'll now segue into the big news itself, and pay-per-view is going to be a part of this. And we're going to talk about the UFC and the partnership that they've just signed with CBS and Paramount. That deal is 7 years, $7.7 billion, which, if I've done my maths about right, Nick, that's pretty much double what they were making with ESPN previously, which I think was around 500
million. A little bit, maybe even a little bit more, I think, depending on the exchange.
Yeah. So quite a significant jump. We talked a little bit about where the UFC would potentially go next. I mean, we've talked about Netflix because of the TKO partnership and WWE being already transitioned over to there. I don't know if there was a ton of smoke that Paramount Plus would be there, but maybe that's us not paying enough attention. But it is a significant deal in terms of the increased money that the UFC is going to make off the back of this, which is significant in itself. When we've been talking about our sports rights plateauing, flattening, clearly not the case for the UFC at this stage. But the other really interesting part of this is all of the fights are going to be streamed on Paramount Plus. And then some of the major events they talked about could just be put directly on CBS, the linear broadcast channels. So, Nick, there's the side of, UFC found a new partner, significantly increased the revenue from the broadcast rights. But then there's a whole other side that they've come out and said nothing's going to be on pay-per-view, which UFC has famously been involved in. And, combat sports in general, we've talked about, we're sharing stories that are nearly 20 years old now, Nick, about pay-per-view, and it goes back even further than that. Hell, the Tyson fight's maybe 30 years back now. It's scary. It's probably not 30, but it's not far. It's closer to 30 than 20, I think, Nick.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to admit that, but it might be.
I'm too scared to look it up now to confirm how long that was ago, but yeah.
But yeah, so there's a few ways to go through and tackle this. I mean, maybe before we get into the pay-per-view
97, 96. They had two fights, 96 and 97. The bite fight was 97. There you go. Yeah. So
closer to 30 than 20.
Yeah. That's worse than I expected.
Yeah. So let's tackle this in two parts. So the first part, let's talk just strictly the business side of things. UFC finding a new partner. Yes, ESPN we've talked about is a great partner because of all the side pieces it can do as a media outlet. But it's not like CBS doesn't have a sports background with some of the other entities it works with college basketball, the SEC and college football, the NFL. It's not like they're not a sports media entity at the same time, but it is a change, but big money involved with it. So I see it as a win-win.
Well, I think it is a win-win for the two parties that have done the deal. The money is extraordinary. Look, I think taking a step back, you've got to look at some of the other pieces that have sort of played out, or the things that have happened alongside this. You had the Skydance merger, valued at $8 billion, and then immediately there's a deal for almost equivalent amount of money to do some rights deal with the UFC. Which is let's just pause there for a second. Think about this. There's two of the biggest names in media, Skydance and Paramount, come together, and their collective value is about the set of one set of major sports media rights for a number of years. So licensing rights for a few years is the value equivalent to these organizations. It's quite extraordinary to think about how that perception of value, or just how that value is manifested. But anyway, I digress. I just thought those numbers were eerily close to each other, and the timing was really close. Then you marry up ESPN and the NFL deal happening. There's reportedly a commitment of a couple of extra $1 billion going towards the NFL from ESPN for those the ability to have the Red Zone and NFL Network license and so forth. And then you have WWE announcement. ESPN's also got WWE. So those things are connected. Now, what was the chicken and egg in that situation is difficult to assess. And then you have to think about, okay, well, they've been running this approach. ESPN have been running this approach for quite a while now, where a lot of fights are on pay-per-view. They've been using ESPN Plus as well as a core channel. Well, ESPN Plus is basically getting wrapped up into the ESPN flagship product. by and large. And we know pay-per-view is a dying source. We've given a bunch of examples on that. You've got the Netflix story. You've got BBC and Boxer. I'm not sure if we've covered that, but that's quite a big news story. Them going to free-to-air there and taking those rights from Sky. And all the Netflix fights basically being available to all subscribers for free. And now those are pretty significant shifts of an industry approach that I think sort of set the scene for this to be almost inevitable to happen. And you layer in that UFC has added a lot of fight nights now. They have loads of fights going all the time. That's inevitably not going to be really solid for pay-per-view in the long run by having too many moments. Like, it's an events-based experience. You don't think you want to pay pay-per-view every other night or every other week, right? And that wasn't the approach they took, but I thought that gives the sense of like why pay-per-view is a difficult prospect if you don't have the right players or athletes lined up. So I think it is a bit of like all those things coming together made another deal almost inevitable. I would have thought that ESPN would be quite comfortable spending the money on those rights if they thought they could get the value out of them. But with the NFL and with the WWE deal, there's probably just too much crossover value there to then pay 100 and whatever % increase in media rights on top of that. If the NFL deal wasn't going to happen and if WWE wasn't going to happen, I would have probably bet they would have made a pretty competitive bid to keep the UFC on their channels, even if it wasn't taking the pay-per-view model. But inevitably, that's how it's played out. And Paramount have hit this new business, this new entity has hit the market with an absolute bang, securing the last, well, not, I keep saying the last, but like the biggest set of rights now. The biggest set of rights available to date in 2025. So, a lot to digest. And I'm just curious to see how far Paramount go with it now. Is it going to be just about doubling down on the US and trying to get market share in a super competitive market? Or will they really push into international? Not that this deal really helps that, but because they've been marketing themselves globally. Like, I think with F1, they are one of the major sponsors. They have their brands everywhere on the billboards. Like, what's the play here? I'm really interested to see what's going to manifest from here.
Well, I remember they were the ones that got in trouble with the Premier League because they wanted to sponsor Chelsea. And you remember the front of jersey sponsorship, the Premier League said that was anti-competitive with Sky. I forget what the terminology was, but essentially I'm going to let that go through. But yeah, it is interesting. What I'd be curious to get your opinion about, Nick, is are you surprised by how quick it's happened? Because we've sort of talked about like, we've seen Netflix dabbling in it a little bit. There's been the re-ad seasons talk about switching to a subscription model. Are you surprised? Well, I guess there's multiple layers to this as to whether we think pay-per-view is officially dead. But like, let's before that just sort of say like, are you surprised how quickly this shift has occurred?
Oh, completely. I mean, to happen so rapidly, and it's almost like a set of dominoes, right? From the first one to the fourth announcement. I forgot about the Riyadh DAZN one. That's 4 major platforms announcing they're moving away from pay-per-view in a period of less than 6 months, maybe 3 to 4 months, something like that.
Feels like it's all been this calendar year.
Probably 3 months at most. So I think it is. It's in crazy. I mean, everyone could tell. Everyone could easily point to you. Oh, the writing's been on the wall for some time, etc. Yeah, maybe that is the case. But you rarely see things actually happen that way. You hear them talked about, but not at that pace of line in the sand. We're now moving away from that model, and obviously piracy is probably the number one reason for all of this, alongside consumption habits and alone. But the ease of accessing pay-per-view fights. I mean, pay-per-view fights is the holy grail for pirates, I imagine, given the price point of those rights. So, pretty insane to happen so quickly.
Well, let's talk about monetization a little bit. Great topic. We know that it's going to be a subscription-based model, but it also feels like, one of the things we've talked about with football, soccer, hard to necessarily always do advertising because it's such a flowing sport, not a lot of stops, whereas quite the opposite of, combat sports. It's however many rounds, 3 minutes, and you've got your time in between each round. Now, I know you always want to get feedback between those rounds, but like, do you imagine, they're going to be selling lots of inventory space? Because I know with pay-per-view, you typically don't, you might get some ad placements and some ad reads, but you don't you're paying for that. You don't necessarily get the traditional ad models you would get in an NBA or an NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball game. Do you anticipate to make sure they maximize the value off that $7.7 billion investment that, we might have a new updated experience that incorporates some of that advertising.
It could well be the case. I remember seeing a bunch of boxing matches with particularly the second tier, third tier, where they have like logo after logo on their shorts, and they're trying to maximize every dollar they can. And with the technology that's coming, we're going to hear a lot about that at the Media Summit in Madrid in November, where advertising is one of the core focuses of this. How to basically sell it, how to deliver it, because it is the hottest topic and hottest touch point of the streaming industry right now, is how to maximize that value, particularly around live sports. So I think you're going to see a different experience. I think they will find the right balance. These are smart operators. You'll probably see a lot more overlay ads. So basically, they won't necessarily go away from what's happening, but you'll see them on the screen in different places. There's a lot of great companies that do that type of technology now. We've had Transmit on the pod, who are one of the ones who can do that type of technology and work with a lot of major platforms. There's others as well that can do that. So I think that's inevitably a baseline of how they're going to get more value. And think between rounds is just gold dust. There is a pause in play. They will be able to find time to have a break. And we've seen that those commitments with things like the NFL have led to the NFL being absolute gold dust for media rights in that approach. So given there's breaks between fights, could you see extensive ad breaks in them if it's free, if it's or included in the subscription package? Absolutely, that could be the case. And then if you couple that with subscription revenues, then the monetization does become a little bit more healthier. But you might see that they do change that viewing experience somewhat to adopt, either by adding ad breaks or just adding more overlay branding throughout the fight.
So I guess that leads us to the next question. Does that now mean pay-per-view is dead? I think one of the things you talked about, like UFC, one of the benefits of pay-per-view is it's an event-based business. So you can drive mass attention to that. The struggle with it is if you become the UFC and you start doing so many regular events, it becomes quite a lot of marketing to have to constantly be marketing to drive those pay-per-view sales. And then also as a consumer, like, you're going to pick and choose which ones you want to go to. They might be a victim of their own success that now they have so many frequent events, it no longer works for them to do that. Does that mean the pay-per-view is necessarily dead? If we finally, in the UK, the fight we've all been begging for, we finally get Anthony Joshua versus, oh my gosh, how have I forgotten his name? The Gypsy King.
Oh, Tyson Fury.
Yeah. Everyone's been begging for that fight. If that fight finally happens, I can understand why pay-per-view would make sense for that. So I guess sort of, Nick, with what we've seen over the last few months and all the examples we've just talked about, is pay-per-view dead, or is it just dead for maybe the current iteration of this model?
Oh, I would say the easy answer is, it's not dead, it's going to live on. I reckon it's pretty dead for now. I would say for now, not going to be too many organizations looking at it actively unless there's legacy issues and reasons for it. The effort will therefore be working with partners who can monetize through multiple facets, basically through subscription and through advertising and sponsorship of the content. Netflix took that approach, actually, as well with the fights they've had online. The only ones that I can think of, the only types of fights that I think of that could actually draw the interest to maybe make pay-per-view worthwhile, was as recently as was it last year. You had Jake Paul in a bunch of fights, and those creators who can get that real inertia from an audience to, like, we're going to back you and support you by buying your bout. I think that could still have a play if it's entertaining enough. That's going to pull those types of audiences. Otherwise, and that is a potential. But I could easily see now that someone like Jake Paul, if he was going to continue to do those fights, would just try and do a deal with some of these big platforms instead. That gives him much more visibility if the price tag is right, and he's shown he can pull an audience for those things. So I think it's dead for now. I think inevitably it will come back. I think you'll see people doing it still, but inevitably you don't see four of the biggest players in the industry move away from it in quick succession unless there's a real reason behind it.
And is that your opinion specifically for, we'll call it combat sports? Because I could think of something like the Sidemen charity football match that happens once a year, or on a much smaller scale. We've talked about one full. Actually, I don't know. I think they did it on YouTube, did they, Nick?
Isn't it?
Yeah, I think they did do that on YouTube.
I'm pretty sure. Right.
Maybe
they built their lives on. They built their careers on YouTube. I can't imagine. I mean, they might do, but I would imagine that is a YouTube play. I mean, we can work that out pretty quickly. I think in general, there's going to be exceptions. There's going to be ways to do it. There's going to be the time where it can be useful is if there's fights that basically don't have like the gravitas that the gravitas of the big events, but still need to find a way to go to market and drive revenue. Maybe the diehard boxing fans that maybe want to get access to some of those fights that aren't the big tickets, that aren't the draw cards. I could still see them potentially using pay-per-view as a model for the near future, because they won't get a financial deal from any of the other major players if they're not needle movers. That could continue. But other than that, I struggle to see it living on in the near future. Now, things could change. Piracy gets resolved better. Yeah. Who knows? But for now, I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think of things, it's not pay-per-view in the sense, but you got things like in the UK, like Now TV, where you can pay a 24-hour pass, which, as far as I'm concerned, is basically, when you're doing it on a one day, it's kind of a pay-per-view where if there's a big football game I want to watch, I can just pay for the one-off. I think there could still be smaller stuff. Yeah.
That's a fair point. I think I keep looking at it through the lens of fight sports and combat sports, but I think your point about like making stuff accessible that wouldn't be accessible otherwise from whether it's pay-per-view, whether it's a TVOD, or whether it's just, an anecdotal payment to get access to it. Like I think One Football have done a really good job with that, dropping that friction access for lower tier football matches that wouldn't probably ever be pirated, but wouldn't be available otherwise. Yeah. I think that still has legs at the right price point, but that's different to the pay-per-view, the traditional pay-per-view.
100%.
Yeah. It's dozens and dozens of dollars or pounds or whatever currency you want to work with, to be a much more incremental rev share. It's so incremental. Anything, I guess, anecdotally less than a cup of a coffee, I think is probably up for grabs still.
Yeah, no, that's probably a fair way to look at that and think about that. But yeah, it's hard to see that changing. And not to go on a tangent, that's why I think piracy is such an interesting conversation, because it came up in the Sky Premier League kickoff talking about the 3 p.m. blackout. You probably are right. Probably part of the reason they're going to Paramount is how much money are we losing to these one-off pay-per-view fights that, maybe in the first round, we've got no chance of ever shutting down the pirated streams. Like, I don't know if you'd ever be able to put a specific number if you're looking at the pie, what percentage of the pie is, due to piracy. Like, it feels like it's got to be a part of it, and we're seeing some of the impact of that.
And probably the UFC in this instance is probably a victim of their own success and their frequency. Yeah. Like if you have a real tentpole moment, I reckon what you would probably find that wasn't coming around very often. Like there might be a chance if it's a legit, I must see TV, then you probably have a lot of fans that wouldn't risk trying to pirate it and getting a shutdown mid-fight if it was big enough. But if it's a regular cadence of what UFC offers, then probably people are like happy to give it a crack on piracy and see what plays out. So small thing, but I think it's an important part of it for sure.
And then I actually don't know enough about this, Nick. You may know more than me, is how that's ultimately going to impact the fighters. Dana White's come out and said, the fighters are going to get a pay raise, but I know that's also one of the benefits of pay-per-view. And it's also one of the reasons why you tend to get some ridiculous pre-fight interviews, is to draw that. If all of a sudden, there isn't necessarily the impetus that I'm the main card fight, and I'm pretty sure they typically have in their contracts, hey, we're going to split the pay-per-view 60-40 depending on who's the bigger fighter. Whether that changes the sport or not, I mean, I'm sure they'll have some sort of bonus scheme in there, but it feels like that is a part of the fight business, right? Is you have the stare downs and things like that. Is there as much of an impetus on that when there's not a necessity to drive the pay-per-view numbers?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I would say my view on it is that when you go from pay-per-view to working with a major platform, in this case Paramount, there's like a baseline of visibility that you basically guarantee for just being on those platforms, right? That basically if boxers don't have to do much, it'll just be appointment viewing. People will watch it because it's on. They won't really look into who's going to be fighting beforehand to make a decision, because they don't have to make a conscious purchasing decision. They can just go check it out. And therefore, that I think you will see consistently numbers obviously skyrocket with no pay-per-view barrier to it. And therefore, the baseline of consumption will be pretty much flatter, I think, as a result of that. But monetization, particularly around advertising, will still be around those tentpole fights, is my guess. So I think you might see a much more flatline distribution of revenue, I would expect. I mean, this is going to be a tricky time for UFC to work through this, since it's such a unique situation to be in. How given the shifting from that pay-per-view that is so tangible to measure. Okay, you basically led to bringing in 1,000 pay-per-views. You can get X of that. That's an easier sell versus just from a pure ratings perspective, because there are so many other factors at play when you're just part of the mix of the ecosystem. Bigger audiences, but maybe not as needle moving, in like your personality might be not as a key metric in there to draw audience, if that makes sense. So I think it is going to mean they're going to have to take a very different approach. I don't think it could just be even just on ratings alone. Yeah. They might do, but it might even change the way they construct. What do you call them? The cards, basically. All that type of thing might change now as a result. Perhaps who knows?
Yeah, we will see. It'll be interesting. That deal doesn't technically, I think, officially start till 2026, so we're not going to see any fights there in the coming months, but I'm sure it'll be something when we get to the start of the new year, we're going to come back around and keep an eye on how some of those first couple of events go.
Yeah, for sure. I think two things that I'll wrap on here is, one is it will be super interesting to see what ESPN now do for this next 12 months. Will they continue with the pay-per-view model? Because the relationship's ending. So will they try a different approach? Will they wrap it in, take away that pay-per-view barrier, and just actually bring those fights onto the platform to see if it creates any inertia for subscribers? Could be a nice acquisition tool on the new flagship product. Yeah. And just with this deal in place, just important to emphasize that this could really push UFC and combat sports into the mainstream way more than ever. Now, that's really significant. So if they get it right, and UFC will have to be smart about this, because they might have to get more focused again on building up the personalities in the sport. They need another Conor McGregor or two. Those really those names and those figures that transcend fight sports to be just a personality I want to see fight. If they can find a couple of those to hang their hats on, back them, support them, then in a few years' time, as this deal plays out and you have the storytelling of Skydance perhaps wrapped around this to tell more stories around the UFC. I mean, UFC itself as a competition and combat sports and MMA could be in a whole nother stratosphere if this all plays out the way they want it to.
Yeah, well, like I said, we'll definitely keep an eye on it as things go. One of the things you mentioned, Nick, through there, a little side note, was around the advertising forum taking place at Sports Pro Madrid. And, it's something we've briefly touched on. We did an episode reviewing one of our StreamTime Connect events, but I think it's just worth giving the people an update on how that is. The StreamTime membership, which is obviously off the back of the StreamTime Sports podcast that you're all listening to. Actually, it's not even a podcast anymore, Nick. We're doing full-blown video. It's the StreamTime Sports.
Mate. It's a show.
Yeah. It's not a podcast. It's a show. At the moment, Nick, if my maths are right, we're up to 19 members now, so just shy of 20. That number's continuing to grow as we go along. We had our first event at the Snap offices in London. We've got future events coming up. We will have an event at IBC. As far as I'm aware, one of the largest broadcast shows in the world annually. There will also be the VIP dinner taking place at Sports Pro. It's not even the OTT Summit, the Sports Pro Media Summit, Nick. The times are always changing. You got to get it right, which we host annually in Madrid. There's also already a date booked in February of 2026 to be hosted. Maybe I'll keep that a surprise, a secret, but I don't know if it's official yet, Nick, but we know it's happening in February 2026. But quite a few things from a StreamTime member perspective, people getting on board. Like I said, the IBC event will be a great one, just where that's being hosted at, but just giving people a little bit of an update on where we're at with that, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got plenty of things happening. We probably don't talk enough about what we're doing behind the scenes around connecting our community around these types of things. The fact we've reached as many members as we can now, for those that aren't familiar with it, these are company members, so they aren't individuals. So they're companies that we are having as part of the membership community. And we are limiting the number of this. I don't know, unless we'll have to reshape the membership offering if we keep signing up too many more members. So something for us to keep focused on. But our effort and our energy is around building a community that really is a connective tissue of basically sports properties and platforms, connecting with people who are in and around the technology and service aspects of the industry, and creating a real place where they can come together and build relationships, share learnings in a much more intimate gathering than your big, massive trade shows like the IBCs and NABs of the world that are many of the real technical people focus on. But we want to blend, obviously, business and tech like we do at all of our events as well. So really happy with how that's shaped up. We may have to look to evolve it soon whether it's adding more events or doing other things around the side of it. But we've had a really great response from the audience to this point. And if anyone has any ideas and wants to share what we should do from a content perspective, supplementary to what we do from the podcast, do reach out to us. Because we are toying with some ideas, but the more feedback we get from you, the easier it is for us to make sure we're serving you better. So thanks everyone for your support so far, and lots more to come on that front.
Absolutely. And, if you become a member, I am essentially, it's not I'm the community lead. I lead it off with every show, but for all intents and purposes, I will be your account manager. So if you enjoy the podcast, you'll enjoy being account managed by me even more.
Enjoying your dulcet tones more than just on the podcast airwaves.
Absolutely. So Nick, moving on to the next story. Again, one of the things I found really interesting, and maybe it's just I didn't pay enough attention in the past, or maybe our content's evolved a little bit, is just these stories that continue to kind of play out. And we've been following Liga, and it seems like at least the last 2 years, trying to figure out where exactly they were going to go with their tender, former partners in Canal Plus pulling out, the deal with DAZN coming apart, and they've just been all over the place.
Media story of the decade, maybe. I'm trying to think of anything, any single sports property that's had a ride like they have. I can't think of anyone else.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing, Nick, as of recording this, it is Friday, August 15th. League One season starts today, and I think we've only just gotten news earlier this week about a distribution deal with Amazon Prime, and cutting the margins quite fine in terms of being able to roll these things out. And I'm sure Amazon to some degree has some white label principles that they can probably fairly easily stick some stuff in and play it. But Nick, the stories continue to play out. You literally couldn't cut it any closer really to the start of the season. What do you make of this with League One Plus being launched as a streaming service? Is Amazon Prime actually kind of the white knight coming in at the last second to save them? Is it, on a scale of 1 to 10, how relevant is this?
Look, I don't think it's as big a deal as people might think it is to see Amazon popping up, because they got to remember that what is happening is that League One has created its own platform and product powered by Endeavor Streaming or Delta Trade now, however they're working together now. Yeah. Basically powered by Endeavor Streaming is the base, and they're creating a product. And now what they're doing is they're getting distribution deals to have that product in as many places as possible. Now, Canal Plus has still said no to working with them for the moment. They didn't like the economic agreement that, I'm sure there's some political tension still existing there that's led to that. But Amazon, for those that have followed this journey for a number of years, or those that haven't, is Amazon actually came in and kind of quote unquote saved the day when the Media Pro disaster happened for them, and picked up the bulk of the rights the previous cycle and had them on the Prime channels. Then they stepped away from having that deal in place, and that went to DAZN last year. And obviously now that's played out. So now League One has gone proper solo, and here we are. Now, so Amazon are basically doubled down. They're focused on being an aggregator. So they're just adding another product to their offering. We'll probably make sure that there's some extra marketing behind it to give it extra visibility and awareness. But ultimately, it's just a distribution deal with probably a rev share component to those subscriptions. And that's basically it. So I don't think it's that big a deal. And because it's not a media rights deal, it's a distribution deal. I would have been shocked if they didn't work it out. And if they hadn't worked it out, I would have looked really much more towards the LFP and said, hey guys, what are you expecting from some of these partners if you can't get a deal with these companies that are actively trying to be aggregators? I don't feel like Prime would be the type of organization that would absolutely hold a gun to their heads and say, you have to take it or leave it, in a way that they probably did to others along the journey. So I'm not being close to any of it. I haven't heard firsthand, but I just can't imagine. I think the timing on this is weird, a bit late in the day. However, it could be strategic. It could be that, look, we want to wait to announce it the week of, so we get more interest and awareness with the launch to come to Prime to access the subscription. Maybe, because what's going to happen is when a product like this launches and you've got the seasonality of it, and there's kickoff today, 95% of people who are going to be a subscriber by the end of the 15th will do it on the 15th, probably.
Yeah.
So being patient on when you announce it is probably a little bit of a move to make sure there's more inertia behind the people don't forget they've got it.
Yeah. Well, to your payment point, DAZN has now failed to renew my NFL Game Pass subscription for about the 14th day in a row. I've woke up with a notification from Monzo. Those who don't know Monzo, basically it's great if you're a traveler because basically you can put money in your domestic currency. You can travel abroad, no sort of fees for exchange rates, things like that. So I switched it to my Monzo card, Nick, because last year they took my renewal and I wasn't quite ready for it. And I was like, I was going to buy it anyways. I just would have liked to plan when I wanted the 180 pounds to leave my wallet sort of thing. But to your point, I will renew my NFL Game Pass subscription, but I probably just won't do it until like the Saturday before the first Bengals game sort of thing. So I agree with you. And I think it is worth noting with the League Plus service is basically, it's not too dissimilar than what DAZN offered last year. The only difference is they basically kind of slashed the price in half. I think last year DAZN, it was around 30 quid a month. If you were going on a monthly basis, now it's about 15 pounds a month, or euros, I should say, using the right denomination. And Amazon basically, but they've come, I don't know if this is what Amazon has said or if what Ligue 1 has said about but their goal is to have 1 million subscribers by the end of the first year and targeting 2.2 to 2.5 within the first 4 years. So I don't know how realistic those numbers are. I don't know if that was Amazon saying that was the number they were trying to hit or if that was Ligue 1 saying what they were trying to hit. And I think also, if I read correctly, Nick, you do not need to be an Amazon Prime subscriber to access Ligue 1 Plus via Amazon.
Yeah, that's correct. So, look, I don't think Amazon's going to have too many expectations on what they're going to achieve and bring in, because ultimately, when you're a platform like Prime Video, you can dial up the visibility and dial down the visibility. So they can have quite an impactful impact. Let's go with impactful impact to the success on their platform. But remember, this product will be available in a bunch of other places. It's going to be on through Orange, through a bunch of the telcos. SFR and also Free is another platform. I don't know what that is, but basically it's going to be available in a bunch of places for subscription. So I don't think Amazon's really precious about how well it performs. I'll make it available. They can then test and see who's willing to buy. It is interesting that it's not part of the Prime or it's not an add-on for Prime members. I thought that was quite a surprise to see that you didn't have to be a Prime Video subscriber. But again, that would be linked with a type of deal that they're trying to orchestrate with LFP. But remember, like Amazon's frictionless experience or near frictionless experience on like one-click purchase and one-click subscribes is really their secret sauce, right? So even if you're not a Prime member, you still could be able to buy and subscribe with one click of the button versus the process I've been through a bunch of subscribers is horrendous, where you got to jump between phone to smart TV, back to phone, and then you're bunching through web browsers and apps, and it can be a nightmare. So if they can just make sure that is as seamless as possible, they make it as easy as anyone can to access the platform. That is really a pretty big win for them. But the key thing out of all this is that we got to, I don't know what sort of numbers we're going to see along this journey, right? I think there's going to be some hopefully good reporting done, let's say, around this. But the price point is so low. Like, it is now the best priced major European league to watch by country mile to any other of the major top five leagues that exist. Is that price point, that low price point, which is slash, like you said, it's half of what DAZN were asking. Is that enough to get people to go, look, actually, I'm not going to watch it through piracy or other means out. I am going to commit to this because it is, what is it, only 15 euros. And they even have an under 26 offer, if you saw as well there. That's pretty unprecedented. I've not seen people actively target that at the big league level. So I really hope that this works, because it's a bit of if it works, it will work out a bit like a classic tech company where we'll have a low price point. We'll probably try and get people hooked and enjoying the experience, and then it'll probably inch its way up over the coming years, like any good media platform will. I just hope it really hope it works for them and for the industry in many ways. Yeah.
And following this story for the last couple of years, Nick, this won't be the last time we talk about it. So we'll see how things go. We'll check it out this weekend. Like I said, with the season kicking off, to see how smoothly that transition is, because we know you can't take for granted when you launch a new platform or you have a new broadcast partner. You think back to DAZN with Serie A in Italy. I feel like we've gotten better with our products these days, but you never know. So we'll definitely, hopefully not have to come back and tell a story about how the product launched in its first week. And hopefully we can give them a little bit of time to have the small victory of having a successful first weekend.
Oh, I really hope it works. I've got a production partner that's pretty solid, but I don't think it has a strong background in sports.
Yeah.
They're in good hands with Endeavor Streaming, most likely there. But we know that there's so many factors that can throw a curveball here that if it goes as well as they hope it could, they need so many systems to work well. The subscription systems, the payment systems, the CDNs, like everything in the mix there that has to deliver for them. So I'm crossing my toes and fingers that they are having a good weekend at the time of this recording, and they'll come out the other side with quite a watershed moment for them.
Hopefully so. Moving from one European football league to another, we'll talk now about La Liga, who have extended their broadcast deal with Premier Sports in the UK and Ireland. I think just for context, we talked about on our bonus pod with Sky Sports in the Premier League that they were going to show a minimum of 215 games. We talked about that being a really impressive number. Premier Sports, if I've done my research correctly, are going to show over 340 La Liga matches. So, we've talked about, in international markets, you can deliver a little bit more. You can have those all in packages, but they are delivering the kitchen sink is a proverbial phrase. But the other part of this story that I found interesting, Nick, or I think stands out, is that Disney Plus has come in to get a primetime Saturday game once a week, I believe is what it is, where they get their choice of a primetime game. And I find this interesting because of all these little, I guess you say the culmination of different moves Disney Plus is seeming to do in the European market with just these kind of small hand-picked rights. Because I'll be honest with you, if it's Saturday night, I don't have anything else to watch. If, I can go watch Lamine Yamal on Disney Plus, I might go do it. It's not something it didn't have great stumbleability for me. We're gonna drill that word into the people's normal use of phrases, Nick. But it's
definitely not in the dictionary. I can say that. Yet. Yeah, it might be in the Urban Dictionary, maybe.
Yeah. But so Nick, what do you think about this in terms of, I feel like the Premier Sports is relatively straightforward. I think it's a positive, just the sheer amount of content that's there. But like I said, I find the Disney Plus angle, even though it's a very small set of rights, I find it interesting how Disney is continuing to pick little things.
Yeah, really interesting. I just guess they're testing the waters in every market to see how much they can move audiences from one place to the other. But it's just tricky when you do it with a lower tier sport to see if they get any meaningful inertia off the back of that, meaningful insight. What's interesting with La Liga as it relates to the UK is they have a couple of really top English players who play there. In Madrid, you've got Jude Bellingham and Trent Alexander-Arnold. Yeah. And is it Conor Gallagher who plays at Atletico Madrid as well?
He does,
think. Yeah. So I'm not sure if there's anyone else there that I'm missing, but my point is making sure that those games are accessible and easy to get to, I think will be a really important should be a really important focus point for La Liga, because if they do it, they will definitely get a lot of people following them. I'm sure if you said, Jude Bellingham's going to be on Saturday night, people are going to tune in to Disney Plus and see him in action, particularly if that Saturday night lineup is regularly one of the bigger teams. And you're really only talking about Barcelona, Real Madrid, maybe Atletico again, if Conor Gallagher's playing from a UK perspective. And obviously there's different layers of fans, and someone will tell you this, the league has got beautiful football, etc. But we're talking on the masses here. Yeah. Reality is there's a big tier under big threshold, right? And they have to cover. So I'm all for it. I think it's a no-brainer. Now, it's a no-brainer for both La Liga and Premier Sports, I think, because if people do get a chance to access La Liga through Disney Plus, which is a mass consumer subscription service, and they like what they see, then they might go on to Premier Sports and subscribe if they really want to watch more and more of that action. So for Premier Sports, I don't think it would be something that I'd be disheartened by seeing that their content's being made available on other channels. And let's face it is only one game a week anyway. I still think that the La Liga have to try and be patient, but find a premium partner for El Clasico and those real big marquee matchups. It feels like such a missed opportunity I'm sure it's good for Premier Sports. That's probably their acquisition driver. That's probably what they're paying for. But we know Premier Sports is not got the weight behind it some of the other major platforms do. And if they did have Sky or TNT in particular, seems the one that jumps to mind for me as part of that, then I think that would be given some much needed visibility outside of Premier Sports as their core partner. So don't know if that's ever going to happen or whatnot, but I think that's what they should be focusing on as a result perhaps of the Premier Sports and Disney setup. And they could still keep that relationship with Premier Sports. They don't have to do all 340 matches with them, but they have to just really find other ways to get more visibility, I think. Though they are very, very good on YouTube. That's what they get a lot of credit for through a lot of different channels, is their visibility of highlights.
What I was going to say, Nick, for anyone that's ever watched La Liga coverage, don't know if you have, La Liga have invested a ton of money on the production side, akin to sort of what DFL Digital was doing for the Bundesliga. I'll tell you right now, it is some of the most aesthetically pleasing football in terms of like the production value. Like they've gone all in with, the 8K cameras, all that stuff. Like in terms of the way the game's presented, don't know if you've ever watched any Liga coverage, they do a phenomenal job. It is beautiful to look at on the screen. Like they've done a really good job on the display of it. And that's someone that's used to the NFL having all the spider cams and all that kind of crazy stuff. La Liga does an excellent job on the actual production side.
Interesting. I mean, everyone tells you that Spanish football is more beautiful to watch aesthetically as well. So it's nice that they've married up those two parts of it, the production and the on-field experience. So I'm not sure where the league is going to go to. I'm a bit perplexed. Like in a lot of ways, they've been really good at building audiences and visibility through YouTube, through social. They seem to be really good at creating content. Obviously, they got that CVC deal, which was a cash injection, which is built around digital transformation. Also, they said they're pretty well managed on cost control through the rules and regulations of La Liga. Where did that? But it feels like in markets like the UK is a bit of a weird one. Like Serie A had to go their different approach. Ligue 1 had to take a different approach. La Liga, they've had to take very obscure approaches. And my guess is that Sky being the big monolith that it is, are basically like, well, we don't need these rights. We've got so much football content. We just don't need to pay for those things. And the others don't really see the value of basically buying them from an acquisition perspective. So, and then you layer football's challenges around advertising integration. There's not many ways of driving monetization out of football if you don't have a real subscription acquisition play there. So I'm just curious to see what La Liga and these others do in markets like the UK, where this feels like there's such a missed opportunity for more visibility and more people, more eyes on it, basically.
Yeah, we'll see. I'd be interested. Maybe we need to get someone from South America back in again, because language, I think, does matter. But again, Real Madrid, famous for all of its, different Brazilians that it's always had in, Messi being from Argentina. I'd be curious to know if they do better in markets like Latin America, South America, where maybe the language is an issue. And obviously commentary, like they do in English, it's not like that's a foreign concept or anything like that. But I'd be curious to know how they do in different markets outside. Because like you said, the UK, it seems primarily Barcelona, Real Madrid, everybody else, kind of, that's the general take. I wonder what it's like in different markets. I don't know.
I have seen some data on that before, and La Liga is massive in LATAM. Like they are in a really good place there. So they're definitely the Spanish connection is really strong there. So whilst they might not be strong in other markets, I would have expected more visibility. I think they're doing pretty well in a bunch of other markets, and their deal in the US is still really significant. Whether they can continue that is up for question. With basically Messi not being there when they did that deal, Ronaldo's left. When they did that deal many years ago, can they keep the momentum and excitement around the Liga? Potentially, if the Latin American market, which is a strong subset of the population of the US, is still really into that, then maybe it's still got some serious legs there.
Yeah. So the last story of the day we're going to cover, Nick, again, is another story that is seemingly dragged on. I don't want to say dragged on, but has had multiple chapters in its story. And it seems like we're going to finally get an ESPN Fox Sports bundle. If we go back in time, it was the two of them plus Warner Brothers Discovery that were looking to launch Venue Sports, which eventually legally got shut down, however you want to phrase that, canceled, whatever. largely in
Do you
part.
know? Have I told you that we were involved, or we had were used in the court proceedings?
I think you mentioned that David Gandler at Fubo discussed it offline with you.
He had mentioned that to me, that basically it came up in the court proceedings. And actually, then I went on, checked YouTube, and I watched the listens, and there was a big spike around that time. They used a transcript from the interviews that he did with us, I think, in that case. So obviously, that's long settled now since, but there you go. So I'm not sure. I'd say that it didn't really lead to a big, massive ongoing bump of audience for us. I don't think a bunch of lawyers are really our core target market unless they're working in sports media rights. But nice little shout out for us in the Supreme Court of the US or wherever it was.
There we go. You'll love to hear it. But to that point, that joint venture did not come together. Some of that might have to do with Fubo being acquired, where that might end up. But nonetheless, ESPN and Fox Sports are still going to come together with a bundled package. ESPN, we know earlier this year, is going to launch their flagship digital platform. So it's been talked about for a long time. Interestingly, Fox is launching Fox One, which Fox has really been a late mover when we think about streaming. They're really the one U.S. major broadcaster, just hasn't really touched it at all. They're officially going to go and launch their product ahead of the primarily the college football season kicking off. So we're seeing both of these massive platforms in the U.S. launching their streaming platforms, and they're also going to do a bundled package altogether. So a lot of things happening this fall, Nick, with both of those sides. And now we finally have some sort of conclusion on a bundled package.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of work out what the bundle would actually work out to be, because they're two different media companies. I'm guessing it basically just means you get a code or something and you put it into the new app that they've launched, and you get access to both platforms. It makes obviously the cost point much lower. It's a pretty media set of rights that they get to access, because Fox are pretty solid and ESPN obviously are solid as well. I remember when we saw the venue announcement at the time, when we saw Warner Brothers Discovery there, and then the NBA deal dropped. Obviously that was a pretty impactful loss of rights out of that mix that Warner Brothers were also bringing to the table. I mean, it doesn't have the excitement of a standalone platform. It still means you have to subscribe to basically two different platforms completely. And I'm guessing then also that still makes the trickiness of like bouncing between platform to platform still really prominent. So you need to know what's going on where. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like the calendar of events, where it's not all in one app experience, which just makes it a bit clunky. So I think it's a nice for them to bring a discounted offering to the market, and hopefully gets them some momentum on sales. But I think it's just a bit of a poor man's venue, which not even a poor man's venue sports. And once there's two major players coming together, I don't think it makes that much of a difference, really. I think that your point around like what Fox have done today, I think just it's they've been one of the ones that, as you've pointed out, like they basically sat tight, focused on their business. They basically did the numbers and said, well, look, we're not going to lose hundreds and hundreds of millions or billions on launching streaming services trying to grab market share. We'll wait, keep using advertising revenues, keep doing our thing, and they've probably netted the best out of everyone as a result of that. But they are late to the party. So can they grab market share along with all the others being so late? That is the question when there's so many subscription offers out there, that I just don't know they'll be able to get cut through. Except for all those Fox lovers out there in the US, where there is a certain type of demographic that I'm sure that will buy what they've got to sell.
What I find interesting is the actual launch date. Both Fox and ESPN are launching in late August, which will coincide with the start of the college football season. I'm super excited about it, Nick. Maybe other people. Texas and Ohio State playing each other week one is going to be a phenomenal way to start off the college football season. But both of them launching their platforms in the beginning of August. This joint platform, this joint offering isn't launching until early October. So there's a part of me, it's a bit sort of, how successful is it going to be? Because I imagine you've probably already paid for your subscriptions, and I imagine you're not going to get a refund later on if you've already paid for both. So I am a little bit curious just to know how successful it will be at the offset. Maybe I'm just not looking at it from the correct angle, but it does feel a little bit weird. Yeah, like there's got to be some reason.
Yeah, basically, they want to get that initial influx of people who would subscribe at any price, get them on board, and then see if they can use that as a hook once it's through that initial wave to get them to sign up. I'm sure it's very intentional to do that. And look, as I said, I don't think it's one platform. I think it's two different platforms, and you just get access to both somehow. They'll manage that service. So I think it's just a bit of a strategic play to make sure that they've got another marketing bump, basically, to help with acquisition once they get that initial wave of people that would just buy at basically any price.
Yeah. And it is worth mentioning, it is a note that this particular bundle does not include Disney Plus or Hulu within it. The other ESPN flagship digital part, I believe, does include that, or there is maybe an extra price you can pay to incorporate that. This is strictly just a sports bundle, which for some people, we've talked about this before. If you're a parent, one of the benefits of, the ESPN side of things is you can justify it to say, oh, hey, there's some children's content there on Disney Plus as well. Like, this is strictly just the sports offering. There is no other additional of the entertainment, which we know Fox has a ton of. We know ESPN, being part of the Disney platform, has a ton of. This is just strictly sports.
Maybe that'll be the next step on this partnership if it works. And then we have to see what happens with Fubo and Hulu coming together as well, because obviously with that relationship. So still lots of things to happen there. It never seems a dull day, particularly in US sports media. Transferring it to Europe, I'm just wondering if we'll ever see more of these bundle partnerships happen with more competitors. There are types of relationships like that, but not to this level, not this clear, here's two products, you get two for the price of one. They're wrapped in other stuff going on. So that I'm fascinated to see how much of that transfers over here.
Yeah, because like you said, you can access TNT Sports via Sky Sports. They're more than happy for you to have that subscription, but you go through the Sky OS system to go and do that. But it isn't a bundle deal. Who knows, Nick? Maybe we were talking about the impacts of piracy. Maybe piracy will push them to do something like this. And that's not me saying I hope that piracy is successful. Of course not. But who knows? Maybe it'll be the next unintended consequence.
Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But I do. There's not as many players, obviously, in those markets. So that makes it a little bit less needed to do so. But there is a few countries in Europe that could potentially benefit from taking this type of approach. We'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for another packed day of news. Pleasure as always to be with you, Nick, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Cheers, mate. Thanks. Thanks, and same to you. Thanks, everyone.